everyone. It is later than usual when I do one of my talks, and it's probably some of you are in bed and won't see this till tomorrow. But tonight's topic that I want to talk about is fake president, fake news, and fake love. So when we think about the word fake, we think about some false thing, some uh, counterfeit or bogus replacement of something, and it's a mock-up, a mockery of the president, the news, and love in general. So we're going to be talking about that. As far as fake president go, you probably wonder, what do I mean by that? A fake president is not who he appears to be. Um, in some ways, this reference, when you think of the current president, Trump, you realize that he is fake in the sense that he makes up things on a daily basis. He embellishes to the extreme, takes credit for other people's successes, and he makes them his own. And part of that being fake has to do with using logical fallacies. That's a subject that I'd be interested in approaching further in another podcast, talking about the different fallacies and how they're used to manipulate the American people. Fox News is a pro at using logical fallacies, and Trump has used those, many of them, to be one of the most manipulative and, let's say, calculating presidents that ever has been. So he's fake in the sense of telling things that are untrue, pointing fingers at other people, and taking the reflection off of himself when something happens. It's easier to take people that have been by his side and to blame them or call them fools, which is a favorite thing he tends to do, than to take responsibility for one's own actions. And as the president, everything falls to you. During President Obama's days in office, uh, many GOP candidates and their followers constantly were after this man to try to get him on some um, miscalculation or poor decision that he made, in appointing people to jobs and what they did in those jobs. And one of the things was when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and there was the whole Benghazi thing that Donald Trump wanted to berate her with, especially during the election, and he did berate her with that. And President Obama, with great dignity and pride, or at least responsibility, stood up and said, "I take responsibility for that. I know it doesn't fall to my people. I made the decision. I made the call." And so I take responsibility. It rolls from the top down. And he's very much a man of strong character and personality to take that on himself and to admit that he ultimately is responsible. Donald Trump doesn't have this ability. He has an ability to blame everyone else for mistakes that happen, for the falling apart of things in his life. There's someone else's mistake. It's because he didn't really know them. He has no idea who people are talking about, even though there are footage that he has spent time with these individuals, talked with these individuals, made business deals with these individuals, and met with them, and for many times, and then turns around and says, I have no idea who you're talking about. Now, either this president is totally off his rocker with, having dementia or Alzheimer's or something, uh, or he's just trying to be the best actor he possibly can be. And in my opinion, he's really bad at both. Um, so that's kind of where I'm going with the fake president. Every day he tweets attack messages to those that he doesn't like, those who question his authority, those who stand up to him, because he believes that the United States is his business. Nobody has any right to tell him how to run his business or his family's business, and that he can do whatever he wants. He can rise above the law, and he can order certain things to be released or hide them from the American people anytime he wants. And he has been known for making sporadic and or disapproved comments about other people in order to throw off uh, speculation or throw off an appearance that he is doing something wrong. So he tends to make everything about someone else. I am amazed that Hillary Clinton did not become president of the United States, supposedly because there was no Russian collusion, until I read the report verbatim, and that would be a report that I would get from Robert Mueller. I'm not going to trust anything that Trump and his gurus are going to say or indicate was in that report, because Trump has a conflict of interest because he heads up the Department of Justice, so he can tell them what to say or how to say it or how to word it and what to redact in the document, so that other people can't see it. And the only way we're really going to know the truth is if Robert Mueller at some point releases the entire report. I'd like to remind a lot of people that during the Clinton administration, and I'm talking about Bill Clinton, um, Ken Starr report uh, cost the United States millions and millions of dollars so that we could basically get this seedy, sleazy porn um, kind of story about President Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. And in fact, Monica Lewinsky was shamed in a major way about her role in the affair with President Bill Clinton. It did sound like a let's say, what you call a relationship that was consensual between the president, President Clinton, and between Miss Lewinsky. And maybe she felt like she had no other choice, but she was berated, she was shamed, she was publicly humiliated, and this did not stop the GOP from having this report released to the public. And so, for many years, Monica Lewinsky has had to try to, escape this blunder, this part that she played in that entire episode with President Bill Clinton. And on a personal level, whatever went on between Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky is really, between the two of them and between the president and a former president and his wife Hillary. And many people saw her as being weak because she didn't divorce him or say anything publicly about it. And I have to say that I just respect her because she refused to play into the media and play into the whole thing about people wanting to know how she felt. I don't think you need to be in her shoes to understand how she felt. I mean, well, actually, you should put yourself in her shoes and ask. I mean, I was always shocked by the Today Show and some of the other TV shows that would get on the news, and particularly when some tragic event occurred, and they would say, talk to the person, say good morning, and then it would be like, how are you doing? Well, how the hell do you think I'm doing? I just lost a loved one in a tragic accident. 9/11 is a great example of that. Asking people, how are you doing? how are you holding up? Um, that's the last thing that people really want to hear. I mean, because I think that they pretty much assume that you're going to know the kind of pain, or at least have empathy for the kind of pain that they're going through. And to ask them stupid questions like that at a time when things are the most difficult, uh, to me, it really shows a lack of tact and probably a lack of professionalism. Um, in President Trump's case, and I don't even like to refer to him as President Trump because he is so unbecoming of anything that we've ever had as a president of this country. Um, so, getting further into what is going on, this president, and number 45, has become the father of fake news. And Fox News Channel has jumped right in there and played along with the whole idea of fake news. Because whether people realize it or not, what we're being set up for is to have a national news organization that is controlled solely by the president. This is an adoptive approach taken by Hitler during World War II, and it's about control. It's about only showing the American people what you want them to know. And some of the best ways to do that is through net neutrality, to take away people's ability to see everything as quick as what people can see, to talk about the things that need to be talked about, to address those things. So the way to do that is to take away the Second or the First Amendment, which is our right to freedom of expression, for the news media to publish the events. And I will be the first to admit that the news media doesn't always get it right. However, it's been my experience that they don't hesitate to make the corrections or necessary corrections when it's needed. So, fake news is something that has been termed or coined by Donald Trump, and that is to take down the news media as a falsehood, to make himself appear as the victim when he is actually the, let's say, the victim, and then there's the, whatever you call it, the person that's committing the crime, the perpetrator. And so he's the perpetrator of fake news. And he's telling people that this is fake because it stands to reason that if people really pay any attention to the news at all and look at different news sources, then they'll figure out that he is a habitual liar. And I'm the first to say this is a president that lies so much, and there's so much bullshit that flies out of his mouth that if he had diarrhea, it wouldn't be quite as fast as what comes out of his mouth every day. He doesn't think before he acts. He types out blurbs on Twitter, and it's all, just a bunch of fake stuff. And when you start to look at Donald Jr.'s tweets, they're as ridiculous and ludicrous as his father's. He brings up memes. One of them I saw today was his father in a Superman outfit with a beard, and and another one I saw was that Donald posted something that he claimed was a pornographic thing that had his father on it, and it's very childish behavior, like nah 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 nah, we got you, your mom wears combat boots, kind of mentality. And the only thing that I see coming from Donald Trump Jr. is that he is a carbon copy of his father, adult, a robot, an idiot, if you will, and thinking that things are funny, that his father got away with this. He got away with stuff. Jared Kushner got away with stuff, and the other players as well. And I think that there's only so much that you can put in a report for over a certain period of time. And if there are powers that be that either dictate or try to rewrite the report to suit them, then that's what's going to happen. And after all, you have to remember that the Robert Mueller report, uh, at the top of it all is the president. So nothing is going to get through uh, that he hasn't had doctored or quoted, requoted. And so we're looking at this Barr guy who, if he's any relationship to Roseanne Barr, God pity us because of the things that she has said. But this guy is going to say what his president, his boss, is going to tell him to say, or he's going to be another one that's out on the side of the road. And Trump is going to be calling him a fool, an idiot, a loser, and that kind of thing. So, they're not going to buck against the president unless he is asking them to obstruct justice in such a way that they're going to spend a major amount of time in prison. And I think sometimes that these kinds of people or these types of people, they put out the fake news verbatim. I mean, you take people like Sean Spicer and Sarah Huckabee Sanders and Kellyanne Conway and I don't remember the guy's name, might be Robert Miller or whatever his name is. They all mimic and say the things that the president wants them to say. Even when those things, you can tell when they're being spoken, are so fake, so false that, I'm surprised their lips don't burn off because their tongues are on fire with these ludicrous, obscene lies that they voice and express. And then it reminds me of the saying I heard, my mother used it a lot when I was growing up, and that is, all people have a price, and apparently a price that where they sell their morals and in trade for doing something for someone. So if the money is worth it, then we're going to take it, and then we're going to change who we are and say the things that we need to say to impress or to lift that person up, even if they are the worst, most horrible person in the world. So if you go back to biblical scripture and you're a Christian and you're looking at this man and you're saying he is ordained by God and God put him into place, I think you really need to think about all the lies that this man has spewed, obvious lies that he is told on a regular basis, the malicious, vicious kinds of things that he has tweeted about other people. And before you say, what about the Democrats? At this point, when you face God, it doesn't matter about the Democrats. You're not going to be there trying to convince God that as a good GOP follower or Republican, that you were only doing this amazing thing to protect the president. So your team was winning. So you want to blame the other team for playing dirty or spewing a bunch of stuff about the president, trying to make him look bad. Well, the truth is the president doesn't need anybody to make him look bad because he's doing a fabulous job at that on his own. So when you're standing in front of God and you're in front of the judgment seat or whatever, remember, Trump's not going to be there to argue for you. He's not going to be there on your behalf trying to convince God that what you did was for his, to make America great again. Because I don't see where America is becoming great again. I don't see where anything that Trump is doing is benefiting the United States. The deficit is beyond anything any of us can imagine. We don't even know the full extent of what the current deficit is of the United States. But when President Obama was in office and he was trying to change things around and was very successful at a lot of things, and the deficit was still there, there were so many tweets that went out by people who were Republican or considered themselves to be a part of the GOP, who were out there talking about how he was taking a golfing vacation and he should be at the White House working. But when President Trump has taken a trip to Mar-a-Lago at the taxpayer's expense every weekend, golfing and such, then all I hear is how hard he has worked. I haven't seen this president work hard. I've seen him traveling. I've seen him meeting up with some other people, like from other foreign dignitaries, and then I see the results, and a lot of the results are that his name is put on a lot of the buildings. His children's name, or especially Ivanka, is put on their brand name clothing, like in China. And so they're making money hand over fist. They have done a lot of things to manipulate and to corrupt themselves. However, these are things that immediately people were spewing about President Obama. I think the biggest scandal in President Obama's time in office was the fact that one time he wore a tan suit, and that just wasn't appropriate for the President of the United States. Well, here's what I say to that. To hell with the fact that he wore a tan suit. He rocked it, and he looked good. And the other thing is, this man was free of scandal, where he wasn't messing around on his wife. He wasn't having an affairs on his wife. It was obvious that Michelle and Barack Obama loved each other more than anything and adored Sasha and Malia to the nth degree, and treated them with the utmost respect and love and protection that a parent can give to their children. So I think a lot of anger occurred because here's this biracial. He's not just black. He's also white. So he is black and white. And so it doesn't matter that he was black or white. He's actually just a human being who stepped into a position, who worked that position with some of the greatest challenges of any other president. And some of those challenges were the people who worked against him in the House and the Senate, who were of the GOP party, who no longer, some of them no longer there, but to block and stagnate any kind of positive results this president could bring to this country. And one of those people was Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, and there were a few others. And when you talk about treasonous behaviors and acts against the president of the United States, these people intentionally did things to try to make the president fail at his job. So before you start screaming about how President Trump has been treated, why don't you go back and look at some of your own tweets, your own messages to other people, the things you said about him, and how now those things that President Trump is doing, you are so accepting of it. When I posted to my Facebook page that there was like $550 million deficit added during the months of January, February, and March of this year, just the first 3 months, which aren't even up yet, that we have $550 million more dollars in deficit. And not one person responded or replied to that. But when people were posting things about the unemployment rate during President Obama's term, there were all kinds of hate-filled messages, all kinds of insults, all kinds of really bad verbiage being thrown around and putting this president down. So you have to ask yourself, what's the difference between Trump and President Obama? And that is that, you have to ask yourself, is it because you think he's a Muslim? Is it because you think he's black and doesn't belong in the White House? Is it because you don't like him because he's a Democrat and trying to work toward equality of all people in this country? So you have to ask yourself that question. Quite frankly, I don't give a crap what your reasons are. If you believe in God and you are a Christian, you say you follow the Christian model, then you know that God knows your heart already. He knows the intents of your mind. He knows what's in your heart. So you don't need to justify yourself to me, but I'm not going to justify myself to you either. I believe that all people should have equality because we are the human race, one race. Okay, it doesn't matter if we're black or white or Chinese, Asian, other types of Asian, Spanish, Hispanic, Mexican, Jewish, Muslim, Buddhist. It doesn't matter. None of that should matter. But in America, we have to know everyone's business. We have to know where everybody falls on this sexual scale. And what controls us the most is fear. And that fear turns things into lies and, writing out things about the president that are found to be false. And I would encourage all of you to go to a site called Snopes.com, Snopes.com, and check out any article title before you actually read it, um, and see whether that has been investigated on that site and whether the people that investigated it found it to be a true thing or not. They are very reliable. They will put down whether it's partly true, partly false, whether it's all the way true, all the way false. And so they investigate this. This is their job. So as far as fake news goes, if you believe you're getting fake news, it's because you're not investigating all the different options that are available. Many of you just go to a religious site that you follow and they post you know, whatever stuff. I think the Daily Mail or something of that nature is a conservative paper, it's conservative base. So they post stuff, Fox News posts things, and automatically you absorb it and think, I'm doing God's work. I'm following a self-proclaimed religious organization, and I'm doing God's work because I know that President Trump did not go about a disabled reporter. I saw it with my eyes. It was live coverage. He did it. And so one of the fallacies that he was using is, oh, that didn't happen. And so if you keep saying it and all you keep saying it and you keep repeating it, then eventually you all begin to believe that kind of thing. And if you have anybody in your life that made up something in their head and you just said, okay, that's really not true, and they kept saying it happened to happen to happen, later on, you're probably going to just really believe that must have happened to them because that's what you've heard. And it could be totally a facade, and it could be partially true, and it might be real in their mind. But just because something is real in someone's mind doesn't necessarily make that the truth. Especially when you see the things that are said. During a presidential debate that was broadcast live, I heard well, at that time it was the president, he was running for President Trump, make comments about Rosie O'Donnell and calling her names during that presidential debate. I'm not going to dignify some of the comments that he made, but it's totally inappropriate, totally unnecessary, totally mean and calculated. And the response of how many people just thought that was the greatest thing made me feel ashamed for the first time to really know that people in our country existed this way. When I express myself on the internet or say anything about what occurred, the kinds of things I would get is get out of America. If you can't be patriotic, leave. Well, my grandfather fought in World War II. My uncle died in the Korean War. So I have family members who've been in all the military forces, and they have spent many years in those branches of military and then retired or left after serving 8, 12 years. So, as far as veterans go, nobody has as much respect as I do for what veterans went through. I have a brother-in-law who actually served in the war and was in Iraq for a while, and his children grew up while he was away for a couple of years. And I don't ask him about the traumatic stuff that happened over there because I don't want to have him have to think about it or be reminded of the things that he saw or witnessed and felt, because it's just truly not fair to him to have to relive that horror. So as far as like saying that I'm not patriotic, well, here's my deal, and and I'll talk about this later. I'm patriotic, even if I don't want to put my hand over my heart when they're singing the national anthem. Uh, when I'm in church, I bow my head and I pray. When I go to bed at night, I take the time every night to kneel or pray to God and ask that God will make this world a better place and that people will actually see what's going on. And it's all this hatred that's being spewed that is causing the dysfunction and all of this kind of stuff. And the other thing is the greed of money or the love of money. Um, those who have money and those who do not have money, there's a big clash there. And as you struggle to take yourself up to that notch of the haves, uh, some of you will sell your very soul or your mother's soul to get that money, to get that wealth, and become part of the elite because you think or feel within yourself that you are entitled to that and to look down upon other people and they should be servants to you. Um, and this is why it brings me to the last topic I'm going to talk about, and that's fake love. Fake love is a love that just is a kind of like a false dichotomy of what love is all about. It's, pretending that you love someone to get something from them or to use them in some manner, to take advantage of them. And we've seen this happen many times in relationships. I've talked with many people in some of my profession where they have told me about things that have occurred in a relationship and that kind of thing. And it was very obvious that the other person, what they interpreted as love was not real love. It was about ownership and having the right to do this or that to that individual, which is why we have situations like domestic violence and domestic crimes, is because people don't know when it's time to get out, when the love really wasn't what it was perceived to be at the beginning. So things change. And then people stop and realize the person they're with, they can't stand them. And when they're in the bathroom and they're hacking up their lung in the morning, clearing their throat, you're laying in bed thinking, I hate their guts. And this is just the simple truth. And the other thing is, fake love is pretending that you care about the fetus that is inside a woman's body until that child is born. And what I mean by this is, I'm not an advocate for abortion. I personally find it to be a disgusting process. And I think that through people using birth control measures and being supplied with the necessary things to keep pregnancies from occurring, then we wouldn't have this want or need that people have to have an abortion. And so, in that sense, I think that we as a society fall short. And so, the whole proponent about why um, people give fake love, or Christians say, we love We love the sinner, but we hate the sin. That's what God tells us. That's not what God tells you at all. What God tells you is that you should be like the salt of the earth, and people should desire to be like you by the example that you're living, the way that you're living your life, berating people, condemning people, judging people, and saying the things like you're going to hell to people that I've heard out on the streets, and you're going to spend eternity in hell. Those are judging characteristics. Those aren't messages of love. Those aren't messages of we want you to follow our Christ, our God, because he's great. He's going to save you. You, as a Christian, once you become a Christian, you feel self-entitled or self-righteous. Now, this doesn't mean all Christians do this, so let me make that very clear. But those who feel self-righteous and feel that they are in a higher place to pass judgments on other people and to make the kinds of statements about homosexuality, preachers who saying, you'd be better off dead, or, on Christmas Day, you should go out and do this, this, and that. And so you're sending out messages of hate to people. And if any of you think that Jesus or God, whatever your preference is in that situation, respects or advocates for you because of that kind of stuff that you're saying, well, you're wrong. And when you love and say that the life inside of a woman is a human being, and then the day it's born, you fail to provide medical care or health care, if you will. You failed to see that child have a good education, to make sure that he or she has a meal 3 times a day, every day. And you're standing behind a president who's cutting all these social programs, Planned Parenthood, instead of letting people plan getting pregnant. You would much rather take that away and say, oh, well, you're promoting premarital sex. How many of you who claim to be Christian, or any other religion for that matter, haven't taken a little roll in the hay before you've gotten married? And I'm not saying everybody, but I'm saying many of you have. And so now, because you've lived your life and you're moving forward and you've read your Bible and you believe a certain way, you now feel that it's your place to tell other people how to live their lives. And it's really up to them. Their relationship with God or Christ or Allah or whoever the person, Yahweh, whoever the person might happen to be, is between them and their God. And as someone who was raised Christian, who believes in many of the Christian beliefs and traditions, I am appalled that people are trying to choke people by their hijabs, that people are beating up a Muslim or threatening Muslims, or calling the Mexican people names and that kind of thing. You need to do a history lesson. You need to look back to when the United States was first begun, because in the place in Plymouth Rock, when the Pilgrims landed, the Indians were here. The American Indians, the Native American Indians who were already in this country on the lands when the Pilgrims arrived, welcomed the Pilgrims. And it was their land, their traditions, their taking care of what God had given. And down in your lower middle, I don't know if it's mid, I'm not good with directions, but down in Texas and those areas, New Mexico, things like that, you had a lot of Spanish people. And then up on the West Coast, it was all Mexico. And so the United States moved in, or the Pilgrims, and then we became the United States, and they drove the Indians back. stole their land, raped their women and daughters, and maybe held them in captivity and their killed the men, the Indians, and killed their sons and referred to them as savages. But they were good enough to teach them how to irrigate their lands, how to grow crops, how to make the tools necessary to survive in this country. And then later you have slavery in the Civil War, and many people who had to uh, get the slaves to the Underground Railroad. Wonderful people, amazing people. Some were mostly Quakers. Was the religion, and then you had Harriet Tubman. You had all these people doing the Underground Railroad to get blacks to the freedom, and some of them were shipped off to like Canada and stuff to get them out of the United States altogether, to be able to protect them and to keep them from being re-enslaved by people who felt that they had a right to do that. And so some of you are like, oh, well, we love everyone. And what I'm hearing in our society today is we love everyone as long as they're white, heterosexual, pure, purebred, and they're male. That's what we love. And that brings us to the Ku Klux Klan. This is a facet that I will never understand, and our president is very highly supported by the Ku Klux Klan members. And these are people who think that whites are superior to everyone else. These are people who believe that God and Jesus are white, and that they have a right to hang and kill anyone who doesn't meet the model for being a member of the Ku Klux Klan. And so this goes against everything that your Christian Bible, that the lessons that Jesus taught were all about. Because if you think that you have the right to kill someone, and one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not kill, and you say you're anti-abortion, but yet you're all about killing people who are gay, killing people who are Muslim, killing people who are Jewish, killing people who are not what you perceive to be the norm, then you do not love. You are a fake. And God knows a fake. And as I said earlier, it's because fake people, God knows the intents of your heart, the thoughts that are in your mind, or the intents of your mind, the thoughts that are in your mind, and how you feel, whether you feel with your heart or with your mind. The mind controls everything in the body. So you whatever perspective you have on that. But the truth is, if you're fake, then you are not of the things of God. If you're pretending that you care about infants or babies while they're in the mother's womb, and then afterwards you don't care about social programs and that kind of thing, then you're not real. You just want to control. And who has the babies? Women. So you just want to control their bodies, just like you have a need to control everything else. And so I think in this sense, you're not leading by example, you're leading by dictating. So, and a lot of you are like, okay, this country was found on Christianity. Well, I hate to tell you this, but that is totally not true. This country was found upon the freedom of expression, the freedom of religion, to be able to practice and worship whatever religion that he or she or any American believes, and to follow that religion, and to be able to abide by their religious views. And it's kind of like freedom of speech and stuff. People can congregate together and they can have a protest, as long as that protest doesn't spew off into violence and hurt other people. So, that's one of the things that a lot of people miss that concept. I mean, a Ku Klux Klan member who drove a car into a crowd in Charlottesville, Virginia, and killed a young woman. And, people didn't even show the most, a lot of sympathy, except for maybe the people who really are anti Ku Klux Klan and felt something, because here's this woman and she's standing up for the rights of everyone, and she's gone, this isn't right, and this guy kills her, and then all of a sudden everybody gets quiet, and so there's not the posting. But if a man is discovered to have been molesting children, both male and female, what goes out on the internet verbatim is that he was a sick pedophile, and in some cases, what a gay bleep bleep motherfucker. And so it's like, you as kind of capacity, and you live, and that's one of the things I'm going to tell you that are wrong. If a homosexual is killed because